New York.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the gentleman from Georgia for yielding me the customary 30 minutes, and I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentlelady is recognized for as much time as she may consume.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I come to the floor today still waiting for the majority to give us a chance to vote on legislation that will create jobs. We're now 6 weeks into the 112th Congress, and we have yet to see a jobs bill from the Republican majority. It's high time the majority party allows us to debate and vote on legislation to get Americans back to work. Instead, today we are debating dangerous and reckless legislation that will cut American jobs and seriously threaten our ability to build upon our fragile economic recovery. At a time when many Americans are still struggling to find employment, the Republican majority proposes a spending bill that ends construction projects, takes police off the street, and halts innovation that spurs job creation. This stands in stark contrast to the President's 2012 budget proposal that lowers our nation's deficit and creates jobs for Americans by investing in national priorities like education, infrastructure, and emergency energy technologies. Unlike some within the Republican Party, the American people are not looking to completely cripple the federal government and leave the nation to the corporate elite. Americans have repeatedly expressed a desire to make smart investments in our national priorities that leave our country more competitive now and into the future, and I stand today with the American people. The Republican slash and burn budget does nothing to achieve this goal. It even cuts the most fundamental public services, ending policing programs and defunding educational reform efforts here in the United States. As nations like China and India pour money into the research and development of solar panels, wind power, and high-speed trains, creating thousands of jobs for their citizens, the Republican majority is removing the most fundamental of investments in comparable American jobs. This reckless approach not only destroys jobs today, but also in the months and years to come. This is a critical time in America's history, and if we're to compete with nations like China, to create jobs in the United States and win the global marketplace, we must support our own nation with smart, targeted cuts that will lower the deficit but invest in American jobs. 6 weeks, as I said, into the new Congress, we are still waiting to see this smart, targeted plan to get Americans back to work. Instead, we see this hastily drawn-up CR that takes a meat axe to the middle class. And as America waits, the global economy moves ahead, leaving us behind. As the 112th Congress was sworn into office, we were bombarded with promises that an open and transparent process would make a triumphant return to this House floor. But as we now consider our first appropriations bill, we continue to stand here waiting for that grand return. Mr. Speaker, while this rule may have the word open in the title, I assure you this is not an open process. Through last-minute changes, convoluted parliamentary maneuvers, and a pre-printing requirement, the Republican majority has provided an extremely convoluted and restrictive process. An open rule means that as the legislative process proceeds, as an amendment passes, it may spark an idea for an amendment that another member may choose to offer with the changes that are made in the legislation. It takes away that ability. Also, the Republicans adopted in a party line vote at 9 p.m. last night a parliamentary sleight of hand that blocks the transfer of any money from one part of government to another. This means you cannot use an offset from one part of the bill to increase spending in a different part. In all my years serving in Congress, I have never seen such a blanket prohibition. And yet the leadership would have us believe this is an open process and that this is regular order. To top it all off, Republicans have even given themselves an escape hatch with martial law provision in the rule, which will allow them to report out a new rule for H.R. 1 that shuts down the amendment process without the normal one-day waiting period. This convoluted process has once again illustrated that the Republican Party continues to believe that claiming the sky is green will make it so. The truth is you can't create jobs with a press release. You can't fix the nation's healthcare system with a clever tagline. And you can't create an open and transparent Congress by creating an open rule in name only. My fellow Democrat colleagues and I are committed to living within our means. while investing in the programs and policies that will help our country compete and win the global future. Republican majority's continuing resolution couldn't be more dangerous to these values that we all hold dear. I urge my colleagues to stand up for our communities, support legislation that creates jobs, strengthens the middle class while reducing our deficit. Today's CR does not meet this threshold, and as a result, I urge my colleagues to vote no on today's rule, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady reserves her time. The